Welcome back to the Premium Pulp Fiction Podcast. I'm your host, Douglas Stewart McDaniel. I admit it's been a couple of weeks, but we've been extremely busy in the new year. Now, before we get into today's conversation, I want to set the table properly. Today's guest is Maxime von Shamrai, novelist, cultural theorist, and Ukrainian expat. Max was born and raised in Mykolaiv, Ukraine, into a family where education, science, and art weren't separate disciplines. They were in the family's DNA. His father, Volodymyr, is a professor of physics and mathematics who also plays guitar, piano, and accordion and writes poetry. His mother, Ludmila, is a primary school teacher, and his grandmother, Raisa, taught math and geometry for decades in the same city. That's the household that shaped him. He received his undergraduate degree in culture and arts, specializing in culturology, from the National University of Culture and Arts in Kyiv, graduating with honors. Then he completed doctoral studies at the National Academy of Culture and Arts Management, specializing in theory and history of culture. His thesis, Cultural Anthropocentrism as a Phenomenon, a Socio-Philosophical Analysis, examined humanity's place at the center of cultural systems. That framework runs through everything he writes. Since 2011, Max has lived in Spain, and since 2022, his home city of Mykolaiv has been under near constant Russian bombardment. His novel, Scions of the Last Hope, began in Ukraine around 2010, originally titled The Last Crew. It lived with him through years of writing, revision, translation, diaspora, and survival. It has already existed in other languages. The Spanish edition, Vástagos de la Última Esperanza, was released in 2025 by Caligrama, a hybrid imprint of Penguin Random House. And now, Premium Pulp Fiction is thrilled to announce that we have acquired the rights to Max's English language edition. That alone would be reason enough to talk. We're taking on our next author, and this, for me, is a big deal. But what makes this episode different is what it means to become a Premium Pulp Fiction author. We're not a vanity press or a hybrid publishing platform. We're an indie traditional publisher that finances our authors' book releases, editing, layout and design, copy editing, proofreading, book trailers, global distribution in print and ebook. Then, unlike many other publishers, both small and large, we also offer our authors a back-end ecosystem for marketing and publicity, social media support, and audiobook production. For the author, this means they don't have to go chase suppliers or learn everything themselves on the fly. We don't acquire books because they're easy. It is expensive, and we acquire them because they're worth the work. Authors like Max are worth the work because they have a distinct voice, because they survive scrutiny, editing, time, and pressure. When Premium Pulp Fiction takes on a book, we're not just publishing it, we're committing to it for the long haul. Not just the first 90 days, but committing to the author, to their literature, and to the craft, to the long arc of getting it right rather than getting it fast. That means developmental editing and line editing, uncomfortable conversations, killing our darlings while protecting the author's voice, sharpening story structure, world building, and story ecologies. It means respecting where a book comes from without freezing it in place. Now, Max cites Stanislav Lem, Isaac Asimov, and Arthur C. Clarke as influences, but his work doesn't sound like pastiche. It sounds like someone who grew up drawing comics and inventing characters, then spent years studying how cultures construct meaning, and then watched his country get invaded. That combination produces something distinct and rare. Max didn't just hand over a manuscript. He entered into a rigorous process, one that asks hard questions about language, identity, rhythm, and what survives when a story crosses borders. Today's conversation is about Max's journey, not just this book, but writing itself, about what it means to carry a story across time, cultures, and language without losing the thing that made it worth telling in the first place. Let's get into it. Welcome, Max.
Hello, good morning. Yeah. Thanks for having me on your podcast, Douglas.
Well, it's a pleasure having worked with you now for some months, from the writing workshops we did last fall to the craziness we're doing right now, I guess. It's quite an adventure, isn't it?
Thanks. Yeah, that's true. It's
Yeah.
quite a trip.
I hope that's a good thing. So Max, tell me a little about yourself. I've kind of did a long intro bio for you, but give us a little more background.
I'm from Ukraine. Ever since started for me as a trip with this novel, with this idea and this story in 2010. I had just come out from several very intense, I would say, academic years in Kiev, where I completed my doctoral research in cultural theory. I would say that my work, it was focused on how humans place themselves in the center of meaning, how we interpret the world through the culture, memory, and identity, which is like were the main point for my all 3 years work there in PhD course. And my thesis explored something called cultural anthropocentrism, which is like unknown term. The idea that humans are both the authors of culture and the products of it. I would say, like in simpler words, and people create culture and how the culture later controls the people who create it in several words. Yeah. In simple words, I would say that the culture, it forms us, but we remain the ones who live, who give it meaning to the culture. So even back then, I felt that a quite concern. After all, I begin to notice that the human-centered world, it started change a lot. Technology, media, and digital life, it was practically slowly transforming our culture into something faster, more superficial, more imitative. So the human being was still like in the center, but that center was becoming strangely empty, less reflective, more reactive. So instead of writing the story about humanity in theory, I suddenly felt the urge to throw the humanity into a crisis, into the culture crisis, right? So, for example, I raised some questions about it, like what happens to the culture when the world collapses? Who decides that it's worth surviving? And of course, back then, before war, I was living in Ukraine. It was a peaceful times. I was living with my family. I was participating in some organization of young scholars when we were writing some research articles about culture, philosophy, anthropology, how people perceive the cultural environment. I was also participating in some conferences for the young scholars. So I guess this blended theory, academic theory, and it was very influenced those time on me. And of course, my parents, I was raised in culture environment. My dad, he was playing a lot instruments. My mom, she was still works as a primary teacher. A lot of encouraging and empathic from her side. For my dad, he's also the poet. He wrote a lot of poems, but he never published it. And I guess all these things, it stays with me forever. And I tried to implicate in my novel, in my literary trip, I would say. Of course, the main question also for the novel line was can you build a new future without carrying the ghosts of the past? I guess this is like the seed of the novel, right? The most important, it's when the system of power and survival define humanity, what remains of the human. More important questions for it. What remains of the human is choice, fragile, constrained, often punished, but not entirely erasable. So this is like the main outlines from this, right? And actually, at that time, I didn't think it's going to be that I'm starting a new book, just a story, some ideas that I had in my mind. It felt more like a pressure building in my imagination. That's all. I have to process it. I have to learn or investigate some parts of this idea. And I had all this idea about civilization, memory, power, and human nature, but they didn't want to stay inside the academic language anymore because I was very drugged in academic language. All those ideas, they wanted to have characters, danger, conflict, emotion. So they wanna breathe, right? That's what I would describe. So of course, 2010 became the moment when philosophy quietly put on a spacesuit and stepped into fiction, I would say.
I
And
love it.
yeah, and it's not just only the planet, conspiracies, and people running for their lives, but it's more like philosophy reflection on those above mentioned questions that I tried to raise in my book or to raise in my
Yeah.
novel.
Well, let's pause there and let's introduce your book just a little bit. It's set in the year 2136, and we start. And what's really funny is when you first shared chapters with me, and it opens with a shuttlecraft flying across the Arabian Peninsula, and with, of course, my background of 4 years in Saudi, that totally kind of cracked me up. But it's a completely different environment, different atmosphere. The climate has shifted. It's very dense fog, and a lot of change has happened. So kind of give us the setup. Tell us the premise of the novel. And I do want to come back, though, to your transition from cultural theory and philosophy to speculative dystopian science fiction. And I think that's going to be a really fun part of this conversation. But first, tell us about the book.
That's more like a self-contained journey about humanity trying to survive its own collapse, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I believe this is going to be the book about, and it had even another name, another title. It was supposed to be As a Last Crew. It's called, well, when I started, I was starting writing in Russian. It's Последний экипаж, which is like the last crew. And so that's about not just about the political system of the well-known preceptorium, struggle with the leak of corporations in it, and the mystery of knowledge and genetic memory, the fate of the abandoned people's Earth, yeah, with the climate changes and the goal that they set about the exoplanet that they already discovered, and they still discovering some things about it, the mystery things that it's gonna be pop up in the book, yeah, in the novel. These were not just the background elements, but also own histories, own logic, and future consequences of all those events that happened. That's, yeah, of course, I was uncovering some layers of the civilization that already existed in my imagination. So it's a civilization, humanity of humans. But yeah, it struggles, it has some hopes, it has some goals, and let's just set the operation to reach it. Yeah.
So, Max, just give us a quick summary of your book.
I'm telling the book that in the distant future, in the aftermath of the planetary cataclysm that plunged humanity into deep depression, there was a glimpse of hope. The scientists discovered a new planet that could be a new home for human civilization. And the idea of preserving the human gene pool became a prerequisite for the organization of the World Earth Alliance, which is like, it became a priority. During of the last meetings of the World Earth Alliance decided to partially evacuate the planet by creating 6 interstellar space stations. And after only the first 2 stations had managed to leave the Earth, scientists, they continued to study the distant exoplanet. It's called Gliese, with puzzling research results. We have a few characters: cryobiologist Zara Aspen and astrophysicist Gag Zorb. Yeah. So they're trying to get closer to understand the planet. Yeah, to understand the plans of the power of the government, and also to discover and reach into the mystery of the ancient world that they faced. And during all this trip, all this adventure they faced was a internecine struggle between the government and the powerful corporations for the influence over the lunar territories that produce the fuel for the station. It's called hydrogen. And already fractured, even garrison is compounded when the balance between scientist research and political experimentation is undermined by a single prehistoric word, which its meaning was like shed the light on the future of the Earthling resettlement to the exoplanet Gliese. That's a few words of the tagline, for the book.
Perfect. So when we did our writing workshops last fall, which you've really helped me kind of develop, and as one of my first students, which you could have also taught the class. So I know that this collaboration is a two-way street. But we did a session on story sparks, where stories come from. And so going back to 2010, where that's a really, and like you were saying before, that's a really interesting time, because I think I joined Facebook in like 2008 as an old person, right? Because it was up till like 2007, it was just for university students as a way to, meet pretty people on campus, I guess. But we were at that real fulcrum point of culture changing, culture and media, and a lot of stuff going on then. And this is 4 years before the invasion of Crimea. So tell me what's in your mind as far as from your academic training in culturology to this book sparked in your head, and it was a novel from the beginning. And kind of walk us through that whole thought process of how an idea became a book.
Part of the academic learning, I was in my city visiting some local libraries and cafeterias. We had a lot of philosophical clubs and literary clubs there, like some meetings in the evening, less formal, more live, I would say. People read poetry. I guess like we love poetry, as my dad, he's a poet, debate some ideas, argued about art, meaning, beauty, truth, whatever. And there was a talk about the poetry, the role of the poetry in the formation of the personality. And it sounded very impressive. And during all that talk, the explanation became very complicated in a matter of philosophy, right? So, we're talking about the poetry, which is like well understand, and the philosophy and the role of poetry in the formation of personality of the human, of the culture. So it was all wrapped very in abstract philosophical language. And at the end, I understood absolutely nothing. So I just came to the lady who was giving that talk and asked, could you just explain it all in simpler words to me? And she looked at me a bit surprised, smiled, and said, well, poetry just helps the heart think when the brain is tired. So I was like, oh yeah, that's true. But I have to process all that refrain, all that phrase that she already told me. So it's it was funny, simple, right? Because, and somehow more philosophical than the entire lecture. And actually, we have some academic ideas and we can just convert it in a human expression. And so that tension between complex thoughts, philosophical thoughts, they have to stay very simple in a human way to find a place where actually your idea are born. So I guess that was like the main point where the novel born, my novel was born, because the fiction allows me and allows, I guess, to many of the author to do what philosophy sometimes cannot do, to explain some ideas, breathe, suffer, hope, and speak in language people can feel. Yeah, right. So the poetry, I guess, it probably just to help us feel an emotional stage when the brain is tired, right? As she said. So I guess that was the whole point to start the novel, to bring all those ideas from academical years about the humanity, about the power, about the memory, about the culture meaning, and insert it in the story of the post-human era, right? Post-human period.
Yeah. And it's definitely a post-humanist kind of view of what do we remember? What do we retain? What do we hope for? And I think for me, it's just speaks to this time of what do we continue to care about when we're still overwhelmed, or as you said, tired of thinking. If somebody had told you back in 2010, I mean, 16 years ago, right? Not only would this book exist, but it would exist in multiple languages. Would you have believed them?
Well, if someone will ask this question before, probably I wouldn't pay any attention about this, because of course, I felt strongly that this is story I would have tell to the world. I didn't know how to do that. Actually, I didn't have a philological education. Just when I expressed myself, of course, I felt that it's something bigger, and I need to find my personal space. And I already found it. And of course, I understood the literature. It's not because of the perfect grammar. It just speaks universal languages, and it's very important. Yeah, we can write books in different languages, but in those books we have the language of heart, the mind, and imagination. And this is very important. I call that like a universal language. Why all musicians, they can read the note alphabet, right? We call it, the musical, They can express from all different countries, they can express themselves in the music. They can lay all those notes on the paper, and they can play the instruments, and we can contemplate. So, of course, the heart helps us feel, the mind helps us understand something, certain things, and imagination helps us to cross the borders. So this is like about the universal language. We all have emotions, fears, hopes, questions that we would like to answer about life, something else. So that's why a story written in one place can be understood in another, right?
Walk us through that journey, Max, of, this book has already lived several lives. It started in Ukraine in 2010. Then you came to Spain, and your life has changed. This has been written both in Russian and Ukrainian, translated to Spanish, and now you're working, as Green Day would say, with this American idiot to bring forth an English edition. But walk us through that journey of how your book evolved and held your voice through those countries, through the different languages.
Yeah, definitely. This book has truly lived several lives, I would say. Yeah, from Ukraine to Spain. As I started writing it in 2010, while traveling, I was traveling a lot as a travel agent. I was working as a travel agent, absorbing the different cultures, reading a lot of books. At that time, I began to write the novel in Russian. I said it before, and the south of Ukraine, when I grew up, Russian was widely used in everyday life, right? But the Ukrainian was the official language in education, culture, daily communication, for example, in governmental stuff, administrations. So we have to use Ukrainian all the time in PhD course at the university. But Russian was quite dominant as in everyday life in some certain parts of Ukraine, eastern one and the south as well. Unfortunately, and we didn't think deeply about using that language back then. It was simply the environment we lived in, right? So in 2011, my life changed again. I moved to Spain. I just wanted to dive deeper into the art and culture, and Spain has a rich potential cultural history. So I guess it felt like a right place for me. It was also there that I met the love of my life, and we have been happily together ever since. And so I guess that gave me emotional stability during some time. Actually, all that process and that living in another country, adapting the new country takes time. It took time for me learning the language, understanding the society, mentality, finding your place. All of that takes energy. So somewhere along the way, I stopped writing. It was like probably the chapter 7. Not because just I lost the interest, but because I was in the phase of absorbing rather than creating, I guess. That's what I would say. Maybe we can call it the second birth, whatever.
So you didn't, to be clear, you didn't bring a finished manuscript with you from
To Spain.
Ukraine
No.
to Spain.
No.
You brought.
It wasn't not like, it was like, I guess in the beginning.
Mhm.
I started in 2010 and I moved to Spain at the beginning of 2011. So it was like breathing in, but not yet breathing out. That sort of condition. But then came 2022.
Before we get to 2022, first, when did you have a full draft manuscript? And you had mentioned to me you originally wanted to publish this in Ukrainian. So then bring us to 2022.
When I first heard the sirens sounded in Kiev, well, I felt like a real dystopia had begun. That was very important for me. And the book, it was like on the chapter 11, as far as I remember. So I don't know. I felt like something opened inside me. I didn't just return to the book. I had to finish it. But the story stopped being only the philosophical thing. It became deeply emotional for me. All my thoughts about humanity, memory, meaning, the future poured into the novel. Not like directly, but underneath the surface, So looking back, I think the book needed years of life experience to grow, I think. So that was like a emotional turning point in 2022. It was after finishing the manuscript, I was trying to look for several publishers in Ukraine, but couldn't. I sent a lot of inquiries, but that's because of the current times. There are like very dark time right now. Most of them, they closed. The infrastructure in Ukraine were hit by missiles, also the publishers. So I couldn't, at this time, I couldn't publish anything there in my Ukrainian because I was thinking to publish it in Ukrainian first because this novel could feel it published at my home, right? But it's such a struggle time right now, right? There. So I decided to publish it here in Spain first.
Even you told me, I think last week, even your webmaster, the guy that designs and maintains your website, is located in Kyiv. That's a real challenge at times, isn't it? Just
right.
What a lot of people who live in non-war-torn countries don't appreciate is it's not so easy to even update your website, is it?
It's very, very complicated. For example, I'm using the servers of one of the companies for the web creation, but it's very hard time to communicate with them because of the blackouts. There are no lights for almost 22, 23 hours. I had the same information from my family. My mom, she's sending me all the time the schedule they have, some alerts on the mobile phones they receive about the blackouts. So yeah, it's completely dark times there with no lights, sometimes with no water, heating. It's very complicated, and it's very complicated to communicate with the people also, and with the web page designer. I received his messages, Maximo, I'm so sorry, I'm behind the deadline. Yeah, because of the time. I said, no worries. Yeah, don't worry. We're still on time. It doesn't matter. I can wait with all my empathy. Yeah, but that's how it is right now.
Yeah. It's I think it's and so you were I think you said you were around chapter 11, working on chapter 11 when the war broke out in 2022, of course, and that is not to overlook what happened in 2014 with the
Right.
invasion of Crimea either.
Exactly.
So this has been a layer throughout the process of writing the manuscript. But when did you have a fully finished manuscript that you were ready to pitch to publishers?
I decided to wait about the Ukrainian publication,
Yeah.
publishing in Ukrainian. Yeah. So I would say instead of publishing in my own language, I turned to something I could control, translation into Spanish.
Right.
I did it myself. I translated the whole book into Spanish myself using dictionaries. Yes, myself. Yeah, exactly.
When did you learn Spanish? If you don't, I
I
know you
learned
worked in travel.
Spanish for 3 years in Vigo in the School of Languages, the governmental School of Languages, Escuela Oficial de Idiomas de Vigo, for 3 years. And of course, picking up Spanish, yeah, from the life, yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing people, yeah, assisting events and something. Yeah, so of course, coming back to the translation point, it was
Yeah.
quite a challenge, I would
I
say.
can only imagine. So
For
you've
the
got
Ukrainian,
early Ukrainian chapters, you've got some Russian, and now
yeah,
you're
it's like a mix of
which
languages
language did you finish the manuscript in?
in
Spanish?
Ukrainian. In
Ukrainian.
Ukrainian,
Okay. You do
yeah.
have
I
a
switched
Ukrainian version. Okay. I thought
exactly,
so. I wasn't sure. I haven't read that one yet.
exactly.
So I don't know that I
It
can or
was
will.
very hard to explain to the one of the Ukrainian publishers because he was asking me in what
Uh-huh.
language. I'm always I always honest with the people. And I said, well, it was started in Russian, but then continued in Ukrainian, which is like so odd, like, but yeah, that's how the thing says. Yeah.
That's an
So
amazing story. Yeah.
it was a very careful process, a Spanish translation, not just changing words, right? On
Right. And let's talk
looking for
about
the
that.
site. Yeah.
What really changes with translation? Because it's not word swaps. There's idiomatic, there's grammar, of course, but there's also all the things that we talk about with dialogue and subtext, metaphor.
Yeah.
What really changed for you?
And as I said, it's not just about the changing words, but probably adapting tone, right? Adapting
Yeah.
tone, rhythm, and emotional nuances of the story. In some parts, I had to even ask some like random people, my friends in the park. I was going to the park and do some like outdoor sport activities there. I knew a few people, young guys, yeah, and from calisthenic, yeah, park. And I had to ask them, well, how would you say it in Spanish, like in a modern way for young
Yeah.
people, yeah, teenagers whatsoever. So they were helping me. So just
Wow.
not sitting with the dictionaries around or using Google Translate or whatever.
That sounds like literary parkour.
Yeah, asking people, asking my family, my Spanish family also, my friends, my Spanish friends about this, which is like was quite a nice journey, I would say, nice experience. And then after that, I worked with the team for the deep revision and stylistic with the few Spanish copy editors and doing some sort of the proofreading stuff to make sure that the text after all sounded like very natural and alive, yeah, in Spanish. It was very important for me. It's like the last revision for the book. So it was quite emotional, a mix of sadness because of the circumstances from the Ukraine. So I have to adapt myself and translate the book into Spanish, which is like not my own language. I can speak, I can perfectly understand it, I can express myself, but still my own language it's Ukrainian. I can speak Russian because we were bilingual. Yeah, it was quite it felt very symbolic for me.
It's incredibly symbolic, and I admire your courage because th- this is tough.
It's like
So
it
you
was
talk
born
about
in one part of the world, but it has to travel to another one. Sorry
yes,
for interrupting.
but we will talk about. I want to talk about your Eastern European literary roots because that needed to travel with. It's not just about yes, the rhythm and tone will shift for a Spanish language audience or an English language audience, but and it's a compliment when I call some of your writing Baroque because it's some exquisite. It's not just description, it's not exposition, but it's there's a tangible literary quality to how you describe certain features or things that does have some Eastern European influence to it. So I'm really curious about how you feel like that is going, how it went when you worked with the team at Caligrama for the Spanish edition, how it's going with us. We can get a little more into the weeds there, but I'm interested in what were your biggest fears and worries in maintaining your authorial voice through the process from both Russian to Ukrainian, Ukrainian to Spanish, Spanish to English?
I guess the main challenge or difficulties I found that's to find the balance, the right balance to maintain the tone and the whole idea after translated into Spanish, because I didn't want it to sound very Spanish or whatever, French or German, or yeah, I just wanted to sound it more like Ukrainian from Eastern European, having an Eastern European literary voice, I would say. Yeah, so I guess my own translation was quite a good for it because it was completely monitored by me, yeah, by the author who was trying to maintain, even after chatting with with the members of the team who was revising it and editing the book, yeah, we were discussing some things that, for example, that should be said in Spanish one way, but it should maintain the Eastern European literary voice. I don't know, it's like, it's quite challenging and it's quite difficult, yeah, to find that balance, to find that golden line, yeah, between all those languages and translations. And of course, I come from a tradition when stories are not only about actions and fictions, yeah, but also about the reflection, atmosphere, and inner thoughts. So, of course, in my literature, in my culture, there are like a lot of space for silence, moral tensions, slow philosophical moments, that rhythm is natural to me as a writer, I would say.
Uh-huh.
So that matters a lot in Science of the Last Hope. In my book, the novel is not just a space adventure, right? The actions, explosions, and spaceships and heroes, superheroes, or whatever. It explores what we could call biopolitical science fiction of the post-human era, a story about the power over human life itself. Who is allowed to live? Whose memory is preserved? Which version of humanity has a future? These are deep questions about identity, control, and what it means to be human. When technology in the time when technology can change us, right? So questions like these need space, and I try to find this space in the story, in the whole story. So they need reflection, not only fast action. If I remove that deeper, quieter layer, the story would lose the part of its meaning. Yeah, of its meaning. So yeah, of course, keeping Eastern European tradition narrative style was not just about like sounded different to the rest of world, but it was probably about protecting the philosophical heart of the book. Yeah, that I was
Uh-huh.
trying to put inside. So I didn't want the novel only to move in actions, explosions, and race or whatever. I also wanted the novel to think and to transmit all this thinking part to the readers.
Right. So let's unpack that a little bit more. I'm really fascinated by this because I do think in English language science fiction, there's an acceleration factor, and you and I have talked about this a lot, both and I recognize I push you at times on pacing versus sagging in the middle, and I've as a writer have the same issues. I have middle chapters that sometimes sag. Let's just admit it. And so how is that expectation different for an Eastern European writer? Yes, but also Eastern European readers that you want to transmit to, say, Western Europe, North American English language readers to slow down and enjoy the philosophy? Is that one of the goals? Or how do you interweave that successfully?
As I said before, I just didn't want to feel that I've a bit different from other languages. I hope that the readers feel excitement and curiosity. This is like the main point, right? Raise some questions and like they are about to watch a powerful movie, not just to read a book. I want readers to sense the movement and tension and adventure waiting on the next page every single time they pass the page, a feeling that the story will be vivid, alive, and senses that it's unfold the imagination like in a movie on cinema. So yeah, it's like bringing the reader deeper beneath the action, I would say, to put them, yeah, in that stage. So yeah, not just only entertain them, but to say them, to guide them, and yeah, to drag them to the more deep, reflexive whirlpool or tone. Yeah, in some sort part of the books. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that stands out to me is how you really have not changed your identity in translation, but protecting that reflective philosophical rhythm that you've talked about. So Max, talking about the Eastern European voices and you've also, we've talked about Asimov and Clark, but who are your key literary influences both from novels but also from cinema?
I'm a huge fan of Star Wars and Alien. Those were those two big movies. And in regards of the book, as a writer, I was influenced by some authors like Stanislav Lem and brothers Strugatsky, Isaac Asimov, Arthur Clarke, and for example, Ukrainians as well. Yeah, Ukrainian context. I would say that's going to be Volodymyr Arenev. He has a great book. It's called Children of the Star, and actually, it has some interesting points that reflect kind of like a similar, but still, it's talking about the cultural memory encoded in speculative form. So trauma without spectacles, and it's very, very interesting to read. And Andrei Sapkowski, which is like from Eastern Europe, The Witcher. We already know that. We already know from Netflix, right? Yeah, The Witcher. All those authors they have a great influence on me, I would say. And those movies, humanity facing. For me, for example, I was trying to catch the main idea from each book, or from each movie. It's like it's about humanity facing the big questions for me. It's always like looking for the philosophical point in every single book or movie, even if there is no philosophical point. But I don't know, this is how I am. I always loved classic adventure stories and large scale sci-fi films. And actually, where the philosophy and action go side by side. Yeah. Even in Alien, we can find these little points, outlined, about the philosophy to find something mysterious, unknown. Should we keep research or something like that? That combination, I would say, it's like shaped my style. Yeah, it's very important, like cinematic, dynamic, and always reflective.
Yeah, I think you and Jose and I had about a 2-hour conversation one day just about Prometheus and the
Right.
the literary and philosophical dimensions of a quite controversial alien film that I happen to love, and I'm going to just hold on to that.
Right.
So one more point before we wrap up, I want to just through the editing process that we've been working on recently, just tell me a little bit about how hard it is to kill some of our darlings and what that means.
I guess preserving darlings was like a main challenge, but maybe, well, I guess it was kind of like a sort of digestion, like the personal digestion of all those start. Yeah. For me, it was quite a challenge, but it was kind of like relief because, the story stays your story. The story break it down, rebuild it. You don't want to rebuild it. It's gonna be the same. It's like being an actor in the same film, but with different director. Like the story is the same, the scenes are the same, characters are the same, the scenery are the same completely. But the different director. So you have to probably pause a bit, think, process a lot. Jokes, for example, might need be a different tone. You have to use the different idioms. Dramatic moments might feel probably quieter or stronger depending on the audience culture sensitivity. This is, it's like digestion for me. So every language has its own mentality, right? So its own music, humor. It's like, British humor and American humor, Ukrainian humor, Spanish humor. It's completely different from.
Whoa! You guys aren't funny. Don't even. I have many Ukrainian friends, and they're all hilarious.
So if you translate just only words, the story may be correct. You could see from the first point of view, but it won't feel alive, right? So you have to digest that. Yeah.
It'd be like an American ordering tapas on La Rambla in perfectly composed, grammatically correct Spanish that no one speaks like, right?
Right.
So what about purple prose? How does purple prose translate?
My baby, Purple Prose. Yeah,
You love your purple prose.
yeah, I love that. Feeling like a being of Jane Austen, 21st century, but in more cinematic way. I mean, a Purple Prose. I like to think that's the same journey. Yeah, it's like just cooked with the different spices. It's all sorts of thematic. You have to refine that. You have to find the right way to cut some things from the purple prose or adapted it. Maybe not given it like a purple, maybe add another color.
Right, right.
While adding another color, you could just change it into the blue prose or whatever. Yeah, it's like they change the ingredients. So you're not changing the cultural taste of it, but you just adjusting, the whole story. And it's a very nice cooking process.
That's good. It is a good cooking process, and I think we're
Sorry
both
for using so
learning.
much metaphors. Yeah,
I love your metaphors. It's fine, but I think what's interesting is, and we were just talking about killing your darlings. I think you prefer to relocate them. You're like, I'm going to put them into a darling refugee program and move them from chapter 7 to chapter 24. Right. But I'm on to you now, because one of the important things I think is, and I can't imagine what you must, as an author, go through to keep track of the darlings, the purple prose that you value, that is your Eastern European literary voice, that maybe it needs a shade more blue or a shade more red, or maybe it needs a cut.
exactly.
It may need a cut, but also we often are addressing, in my work, in your work, in other work, authors I've got in Savannah and elsewhere, exposition, changes in register. And again, from my own cinematic background and your love of cinema as well, we're often reminded to show, not tell, right? And exposition, especially through translation, some of it works better in Ukrainian or Spanish than it may work in an English language audience. And I know I've pushed pretty hard on you regarding authorial register, where you tell us what is happening in the scene versus letting the characters interact with each other over that material that needs to be shared with the reader for them to understand, how the gliads work, or the preceptorium.
Correct.
But keeping it in the scene. What have you learned about that you want to share?
I learned that it's a very careful and detailed process. Yeah. Even though, the sentences has to be checked very closely, very carefully. Each word, it had some sort of weight, right? So you have to wait, or maybe throw it in some sort of the selection process. Yeah, and it feel like polishing, it was quite delicate, but it was very good. Yeah, because all that stuff, like it was a very familiar for me from the Spanish experience of translating the book and now to the English version. So editing, revising, discussing meaning and tone, working on the voice and preserving voice and tone. So it's pretty much like the part of the same in any languages, right? Yeah. So the storytelling still follows the same basic rules, and you have to stick to those rules, all the time. Yeah. What it felt completely new was learning probably to think inside English.
We
It's
don't
like
we don't
being
think inside English. English
no
speakers, we think everybody. Well, look at the whole outrage in the United States over how dare someone sing in Spanish at the Super Bowl halftime show. Oh my goodness.
yeah.
English first and
Bad Bunny
always,
and all
right?
that stuff. Yeah, and Co. It was a great show.
Max, this has been great. I know we're going to talk again as we get closer to your publication. We're not announcing any dates yet. We've got some work to do this spring to get the book ready for the English edition. But when readers, and I do want to make a point that you've raised to me several times, which is for readers of your Spanish edition, you also want to make sure that the English edition isn't so radically different. It's like it needs to be the same book, but this is an evolution through language. So, kind of a final question for you is when readers pick up the English edition, what do you hope they feel before they even know what the story is about?
Firstly, I thought my novel has to be like for the prepared readers. But yeah, I guess after all, after writing it, I start thinking that it has to be worldwide, that all those questions, philosophical questions and reflections, like inner thoughts of mine, has to be shared with everybody. I guess I had to adapt them to the modern language, not just simplify them. Yeah, all that dystopian vision of the next generation of the humanity and all those problems that they are facing in, yeah, with the climate changes and something like that. Yeah, so I have to just bring the hand, take the hand of my baby, yeah, and bring it to the world. Yeah, so for the readers, I would say, um of the sense of the last hope, I would say the further sentence that don't be afraid to start reflect on some sort of things, some philosophical things. They are very interesting. I feel like most of the people trying to put philosophy parts back, and with all this technology revolution, social media, we are trying to forget about some cultural potential that we have as a humans. So I'm trying to bring the reader's mind again to my story, to start reflecting, to start things about those sort of things. For me, in the future, I would love to hear some questions from them. A lot of questions. I know that we won't be able to answer all those questions, and maybe we will never answer to all those questions. Yeah. So this is like the very important to bring something, the story that brings a lot of questions, and try that everybody thinks about them, trying to understand them, trying to respond there to those questions. And yeah, this is probably one of my goals. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, and I'm a Gen X writer. You're clearly millennial, if I have my numbers correct there. What would you say to young Ukrainian writers and thinkers about these ideas becoming, as you just said very, very eloquently, a world book? That this doesn't really belong to one language or culture, but it brings these Eastern European ideas out to the world. And what would you say to those young writers and thinkers from your own country?
Those times that we already challenging right now, and all my people in Ukraine they facing with all that terrible times, I would say that we have to keep being human, think about imagination, and which is like very important to create things. Yeah. And actually I'm very happy to see some events all over the world. Ukraine participate in some cultural events. It was in Japan, I remember, and in Biennale in Venice. Yeah, we are just talking about the culture and arts, right? But this is a very important to preserve the culture, the identity of my country, of my people, because we're facing the challenging times that someone was once just erase our identity. Even we can speak their language, it doesn't mean that we have to raise our own culture and our own language that we already have all this time, and it's beautiful language. So this is like for me the main words to my people, to preserve that identity, our idea, the culture potential, and even through all that struggle that we face right now.
And to be a creator.
Just not the imagination slipping away from your mind. Just keep it inside and try to develop something interesting, something new, something unknown to the rest of the world.
As your dad would say, more poetry, right?
Right.
Exactly. It's awesome.
Actually, this book was dedicated to my country, to my people that facing dark times right now. And I would love to read it. The dedication присвячується in my own language and then in English. Thank you. З тризубом вони у полі стали, і зорі їм світили, і палали. Вони казали правду перемог, шивали крила полум'ям широк. And now the English version. With trident rising up on the field, the stars shone brightly as they shield. They spoke the truth of ancient winds and gently stitched the wings of flame.
It's beautiful.
Some part of my dad in it.
There's a part of your dad, but this is something you wrote.
He supervised,
as I would expect Papa to do. No, that's beautiful. That's well put, and I can see all of the imagery and the pain and the journey of you, of your family, and of your people as well. Maxime von Shamrai, his forthcoming novel in English from Premium Pulp Fiction is Scions of the Last Hope, but it is currently available in Spanish on Amazon and all your other online retail outlets. Hasta de la Última Esperanza, released in 2025 by Caligrama, an imprint of Penguin Random House. Max, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you didn't feel like I put you in the hot seat, but I think this has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It was pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
As always. And this is, again, the Premium Pulp Fiction Podcast. I'm your host, Douglas Stewart McDaniel, and this gets cross-posted over onto the Citizen One podcast, where you're going to be hearing a lot more about Max, his forthcoming book. We've got some other titles coming out this year that we'll be talking about soon, including my Southern Civic Noir series. And thank you for joining us for a very special conversation with Maxime von Shamrai. And we'll see you guys again soon.